we're going to pick up with activity 49, but I just want to go back and I was a little confused when I was doing activity 48 about whether 48A is the actual words of Hamilton or is he quoting Blackstone. So it's accurate the way it is in the book. In letter A, those are words of Hamilton that I've kind of pieced together from things he's saying in this Farmer Refuted, and then in Farmer Refuted he then proceeds to quote Blackstone. So letter B is the words of Blackstone, are the words of Blackstone as quoted by Hamilton. Letter A is Hamilton piecing together things he's saying. I encourage you, if you have any spare time, to look up on the internet somewhere the Farmer Refuted. I think it would be easy to find, and it's a very interesting essay on Hamilton's part. But anyway, getting to activity 49. This is something that I think it's important to go back to these original sources and see what Americans said, the founders and other visitors to the United States, in the case of de Tocqueville, to see their understanding of the role of religion in a free society. I think it's important not to superimpose our modern views on them, but to see from them their understanding. Starting with de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville says when he visited the United States in the 1820s and he observed American society, one thing that he noticed is that Americans held their religion to be indispensable to the maintenance of republican institutions. And then he goes on to say this wasn't just one political party, one rank of society. This is both all political parties, all ranks of society. This is the whole nation believed that their religion was indispensable to the maintenance of republican institutions. Now, what sense does that make? I understand what they were thinking is that republican institutions are institutions in which there is self-government, that the people have input into the laws, and also where there's an understanding that the rights of life, liberty, and property must not be violated. Well, what does the religion of the Americans have to do with this? It has to do with this idea that there is a God who gives people rights and that these rights must not be violated. So if the rulers believe that there is a God who punishes those who harm others, then they will hesitate to harm others. They will hesitate to harm the ruled. So therefore you have, this is related to living under a government that does not harm its citizens. Also, if the people believe that we get our rights from God and hesitate, therefore, to harm other people because it's wrong and because God will punish those who do that, they also will hesitate to harm others. This has to do with living under a government that protects person and property to the extent that there's individual people who are hesitating to harm others. But also, if you think about it in terms of having input into laws, then the people as a whole, acting as the majority, will hesitate to pressure their representatives to pass laws that violate the life, liberty, and property of the minority. So this ties into self-government also and the proper use of self-government. So really liberty itself depends on the people, in this view, having a sense that God gives people rights and doesn't like it when people harm other people. I want you to, at least in your mind, underline the word indispensable. You'll see this a number of times in this activity. Indispensable means that you can't do without it, that if you remove this religion from the picture, then there will be no more maintenance of republican institutions. Republican institutions will cease to exist. Liberty will cease to exist if the Americans stop holding their religion. So again, this is where I'm emphasizing, which will sound strange to the modern ear because people hear about separation of church and state so much. The idea of the founders, as expressed in these quotations, or as in the description of the Tocqueville, is that religion and liberty are inseparable. You can't have liberty without the religion of the Americans, or this idea that just simply that there is a God who gives people rights and who doesn't like it when people harm others. This is true of Jefferson also. You can see, as we saw in the last activity, that Jefferson is saying that these rights come from God, and these rights will never be secure unless people believe that the rights come from God, and that they're not to be violated but with his wrath. That means that when God likes people, wants them to be happy, and if somebody rapes another person, God doesn't like that and experiences wrath, which is judgment, punishment will come upon the person who harms other people. This is well, let me just emphasize that again, at least in your mind in letter B, underline the words only firm basis, that the foundation of the security of rights is a conviction in the minds of the people that these rights come from God. If the people stop believing in God, if the people stop believing that God gives people rights, then you take this only firm basis out from under it, there will be no security for rights. That's what Jefferson is saying. So Jefferson also is saying that liberty, in the sense of security of rights, and a conviction in the minds of the people, I don't know if you want to call that religion, that gives the rights are from God, whatever you want to call it, those two things are inseparable. You cannot have one, you cannot have liberty, security of rights without this conviction in the minds of the people that rights come from God. Also, the context of this is important to note, because you have Jefferson speaking about slavery in his own state of Virginia. This is from Notes on the State of Virginia. And when he reflects on the evil institution of slavery, he is convinced that bad things are coming for Virginia if they don't get rid of this evil institution, that they will experience God's wrath for maintaining and preserving and continuing this institution of slavery, because it is evil, because it harms human beings, the slaves. And the Almighty, as he says at the end, has no attribute which can take the side of the slave owners, because God is just. God loves people. God doesn't like to see people suffering under injustice and oppression, as the slaves are experiencing. Just on a side note also, when people speak of Jefferson, they often speak of him as a deist. There, I guess, are a bunch of different varieties of deists. But you can see from this that Jefferson is not someone who thinks that God just created the world and left and doesn't interfere in human affairs, because you can see in letter B Jefferson speaking of supernatural interference, that slavery, this evil institution of Virginia, if it doesn't naturally lead to bad consequences, that there will be supernatural interference. God will intervene in the history of Virginia and will bring about a punishment of some sort for this institution and a liberation of the